The implosion of Andrew Tate has been something to watch. So this is a guy who was super duper popular. He was on top of the world. He had this scam thing called Hustlers University. And he was, the ultimate like manosphere guy. Like, yeah, I'm going to show you how to get the ladies. I'm going to show you how to be a man. And it's like the ultimate like gender role stereotype thing. I'm the macho man, but also just reinforcing consumerism and capitalism and like, look, I got a Bugatti, bro. Aren't I so cool, bro? And what a fall. What a fall. So he was, arrested in Romania, and there's human trafficking and rape, and then audio came out of him basically saying like, yeah, I love raping you to one of his victims, and whoo, he's dunsies, dog. It is over. www.dunzo.org. It's a wrap. So this is interesting because I saw this floating around Twitter here. Jordan Peterson's take on the manosphere. So, you see that, knowing what you know about Jordan Peterson. What do you think? Hey, what's he going to say? Just in your mind, just think right now. He's roughly going to say X, Y, or Z, right? He may surprise you a little bit here. So now, to be fair, this was from a podcast that this was honestly probably before he even knew about Andrew Tate, because I think this is from a little while ago. But still, it was floating around Twitter. I wanted to show it to you because regardless of when it's from, it doesn't sort of fit with the general view of Peterson and where he fits in the manosphere world, however you want to say it. Let's watch.
I would say to young men who are irritated at women is, if you're irritated at women, as a class of creature, there's something wrong with you because they're right. You're wrong. They're right to not pick you. If they're not picking you, it's because they're right. I know that's a terrible thing to say, and I know perfectly well, it wasn't like I was particularly successful with girls when I was young. So I know what that rejection is like. I know what that fear is like. I don't know it as well as some men know it because I wasn't rejected outright. What do you expect from women? If you got pregnant because you had sex, you'd be pretty damn choosy too. So, clue in a bit. And then, well, don't they find you attractive? Well, maybe you're not. Like, have you paid attention to how you dress? Do you have a plan? Are you as educated as you could be? Are you a liar? Are you a rabid pornography user? Because maybe that's undermining your motivation to seek out a woman and grow yourself up. If you're rejected constantly and you're out there really trying, because that's another thing to ask yourself is, well, how many women have you actually asked out? And are you so sure that you're not picking women who will certainly reject you because you're trying to bat out of your league? Because you might be. So, and I'm speaking about this as a clinician too, because I had plenty of men in my practice who were, radically unsuccessful with women. I had one man in particular. He was so afraid of women, he couldn't use the phone. He was too afraid of everyone to use the phone. And he had been bullied like mad. And he had his problems. So I know what this is like. If you were better, you'd be more successful with women. Yeah. So you have to have that in your mind. And you cannot be angry at women. It's stupid. Women, it's like women being angry at men. It's a sign of psychological trouble.
Damn. So this is sort of like flaming Andrew Tate and his ilk without bringing up Andrew Tate. And again, this might be before he even knew who Andrew Tate was. But that mindset, a lot of his fan base, there might be some crossover in their fan base. And this is one of those instances where it's like, hey, dog, pick a side. Like, are you going the Tate direction or are you going the Peterson direction? And look, I think ultimately, in context, this makes sense for Jordan because there's two parts to him, right? There's the self-help / psychologist part to him, and then the other part of him is political Jordan Peterson. And like on the political stuff, back in the day it was sort of ambiguous, and it's like, oh, maybe he's an enlightened centrist. But then over time it became clear the deal with the Daily Wire and the stuff he started leaning into. It's like, no, you're pretty committed conservative, at least effectively in like the message you put out and how people interpret it and perceive it. It's, you lean right. But this is more from the vein of the self-help / psychology stuff where it's like, look, if there's a problem, you get it together, dog. Don't just point fingers. Don't just blame women in general. In the same way people would get triggered if you're like, men are like X. It's like, what does that mean? Who? Which man? They're all the same? Like, how does this function? Like, give me the specifics of this. So, yeah, look, this is so intense. Even I slightly disagree with it. So let me explain what I mean. Now, giving somebody this advice on a personal level, I understand that. Like, individual, person to person, hey, here's what you should do. Like, get it together a little bit, then take a shower, clean your room, whatever, fill in the blank, all that stuff. But I think what this analysis misses, and I think this is sort of endemic to his worldview, is that, no, there are also cultural and social and economic factors which make it harder than you're sort of laying out here. You know what I mean? So in other words, if we live in a society where 63% of people live paycheck to paycheck, we live in a society where 40 million people, 44 million people have student loan debt, and they're really struggling to pay it back, and the overwhelming majority of them can't afford it. You know, we live in a society where 85 million people are uninsured with healthcare or underinsured. Like, there are some society-wide factors here that are putting people behind the eight ball where it makes it almost impossible to dig your way out of it. And so I guess my contention here is this. Let's say we created a world where everybody had healthcare, everybody had education, including college or trade school, everybody had higher wages, everybody had, a right to a union, childcare, like just the basics, right? Like if we lived in a world where the basics were covered in a social democratic system, just by the very nature that people are now getting a more fair shake, that by definition would create far fewer losers who feel socially isolated and alienated and sort of check out of the system. And then they could sit back and sulk and blame women for their failures or whatever. Like, you would see the number of, for example, incels plummet in a system like that. Now, it's not a silver bullet, right? Like, I'm not an idiot. I know that if we have a social democracy, it's not like, well, no boys are going to be awkward anymore. Like, no, that's obviously not true. But we're talking about in the aggregate what would happen. And if we just had a better society that gave people a fair shot at success, then a lot of people who have checked out wouldn't have checked out in the first place and maybe would have gotten it together enough to be able to go on some dates, get a girlfriend, get a wife, whatever, So really, I mean, my answer is sort of like a mix of the two, which is at the individual level, when you're giving somebody advice, I have no problem with what he's saying here. That no, it's not their fault. It's not women's fault. Like, look in the mirror, kind of get it together a little bit. You can't just blame everybody else for your problems. Like, let's actually work on you to try to get you to a better place so that you give yourself a chance at success. And once you start taking steps in the right direction, it'll feel better and better and better. And that'll create momentum. And then you'll definitely want to go more in that direction. So you got to mix that with also the structural critique. And look, that's what I think generally is missing from this conservative worldview. It's like when I went on the PBD podcast, and like a lot of the stuff that they say, I don't disagree with in a vacuum. If you talk about self-help stuff, if you talk about hard work, if you talk about improving yourself, it's like, great. I like a motivational rant just as much as the next guy does. But if you only talk about that and you never bring up the structural factors, that is just misleading by its nature. It's just misleading, because effectively what you're saying is everybody needs to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, even if you don't have boots. And that's impossible. That's impossible. So you have to simultaneously go after and try to fix the structural issues while also, trying to, as an individual, move forward and better yourself. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. But interesting clip. I don't think most people would expect Peterson to react like this to a question like this, but there you have it. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.